The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, classic spaghetti western released in 1967. Set during the American Civil War, we follow three characters: Clint Eastwood's man with no name, aka The Good, the villainous Angel Eyes, aka The Bad, and the bumbling yet cunning Tuco, aka The Ugly. Three top-of-their-game gunslingers, who are out on their own individual quests to find a fortune of buried gold, with many violent and dramatic misadventures along the way. All of which lead up to the classic and tense standoff that most people remember the movie for. The question is, who will prove victorious and leave with both the gold and their lives? So it's about time that I explored a classic western, and what better one to start with than The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. So let's travel back to the 60s, to the era of the spaghetti westerns, as we check it out. Jeez! Number 10. The story was made up on the spot. In the mid-60s, Italian filmmakers Sergio Leone and Luciano Vincenzoni were having great success with their spaghetti westerns, A Fistful of Dollars and its sequel, For a Few Dollars More, both of which featured Clint Eastwood as his iconic man with no name cowboy character. Although the two movies were doing well in Europe, they hadn't yet reached the American market, where United Artists, who at the time were distributing the James Bond movies, were interested. Leone and Vincenzoni flew in two United Artists executives to Rome to discuss negotiations for their company to distribute their movies. Now, United Artists wanted to distribute A Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, but as part of their deal, they also wanted to distribute a third movie. Now, Leone and Vincenzoni hadn't planned on making a third movie at that stage, and thus there was nothing to go on, but Vincenzoni improvised in the meeting, making it up on the spot, as he spoke of a story about characters working their way through the Civil War, trying to get their hands on some money. And just like that, the movie's poster flashed in his head, which read, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And so, the movie was born. Number 9. Orson Welles tried to convince the filmmakers not to make the movie. So United Artists were backing The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, with Sergio Leone directing and Luciano Vincenzoni writing, as they had both done with For a Few Dollars More. However, one Hollywood legend wasn't sure that this production was a good idea, and that was none other than Orson Welles. According to What Culture, Welles warned Leone not to make The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, on the account of its Civil War setting, as most movies set during the Civil War tend to be box office poison, as most of the movies that are set in that time period hardly ever perform well. Well, not all the time, but most of the time. Despite the pleas from Welles and the fact that the movie wasn't being shot in America but Spain, Leone was determined to recreate the American Civil War and make it feel as authentic as possible. So he took inspiration from the photography of Matthew Brady, who was a photographer during the Civil War, where Leone used his pictures as a blueprint when it came to the look of The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. So it may have seemed a little discouraging having the genius behind Citizen Kane to have no faith in your movie. But what's worse is that it seems that the movie's main star wasn't even keen on it either. Number 8. Clint Eastwood took a lot of persuading to star in the movie. Without a doubt, Clint Eastwood is one of the most prominent faces of the spaghetti western genre, and seeing how The Good, the Bad and the Ugly was a follow-up to the Dollars movies, naturally he would have been required to return as his man with no name character, aka Blondie, aka The Good. However, Eastwood wasn't too enthusiastic. He thought that he was getting a poor deal. According to Mental Floss, he wasn't too keen on the fact that The Good, the Bad and the Ugly was an ensemble piece, with him being the third part of the movie's main focus, the others being the Angel Eyes and Tuco characters, further stating that at this rate, in the next movie, he'll be starring with the American Cavalry. His other issue was that of his fee, as he felt that he should have been getting paid more. After all, he was the star of these movies. However, he didn't have much wiggle room for negotiating, as the previous movies hadn't reached the States yet, and he wasn't much of a big star in that part of the world. Yet. An emphasis on the word yet. Eastwood's reluctance to sign up was delaying the filming, so Leone and his wife travelled to California to try negotiations to get Eastwood to star in the movie. And after 2 days of negotiating, Eastwood was promised a salary of $250,000, as well as 10% of the movie's earnings, and a new Ferrari. Yep, that'll get the job done alright. Leone supposedly wasn't too thrilled about this idea, but in hindsight, it's frickin' Clint Eastwood! You definitely get what you pay for. Number 7. Casting the Bad and the Ugly. When it came to Tuco, aka the Rat, aka the Ugly, the comical bandit character, American actor Eli Wallach was cast in the part. He had previously starred in other westerns, The Magnificent Seven and How the West Was Won. And he actually based his performance of Tuco on the Charlie Grant character that he had previously played in the as mentioned How the West Was Won. When it came to Angel Eyes, aka the Bad, the villain of the piece, that bit of casting proved trickier, as Leone originally wanted to cast Italian actor Enrico Maria Salerno in the part, who dubbed Clint Eastwood's lines for the Italian releases of the dollar movies. But that didn't work out. Leone's next choice for the part was Charles Bronson, but he turned the offer down, as at that time he was too busy filming The Dirty Dozen. So then the idea of casting American actor Lee Van Cleef was brought to the arena. Leone was actually excited about this, as Cleef had previously played a more romantic character in the previous movie for a few dollars more, and he was excited about the idea of casting him in an opposite role, one that isn't romantic but rather ruthless and sinister. So he was cast. Number 6. Rejected script ideas. According to scriptwriter Luciano Vincenzoni, all 3 main characters in The Good, the Bad and the Ugly were in part based on director Sergio Leone, with each character depicting several of his personality traits. While Leone and Vincenzoni were working on the script, it was decided that more humour should be added, where Italian comedy writing duo Age and Scarpelli were hired to also work on the script. But according to Leone, he couldn't use any of the material that they had written, as what they had written was, quote, the grossest depiction of my life. Vincenzoni had apparently written the script in just 11 days before walking off the project, on the account that he really wasn't getting along with Leone. In the original script, Clint Eastwood's character was called Joe, as that was a nickname his character had in A Fistful of Dollars. But it was decided to give him the nickname of Blondie for The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. And in the original script, the villainous Angel Eyes was called Banjo, but the name Angel Eyes came to be because Eastwood kept referring to the character as Angel Eyes on the set, due to Cleef's physical appearance and gun marksmanship. The original title of the film was Two Magnificent Tramps, till it was changed to The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, just mere days before filming was to take place. And when being released in the States, United Artists had thought about changing the title to The Man with No Name or River of Dollars, but ultimately chose to stick with the Italian title of The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. Number 5. Filming. Despite being backed by United Artists, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly was entirely an Italian production, with on-set filming taking place at a studio in Rome and location filming taking place around Spain, including a plateau region near Burgos, as well as Almeria and Madrid. And there were a few mishaps that took place during the filming, such as a scene where a bridge explodes, which had to be filmed twice, as the 3 cameras that initially filmed the first take were destroyed by the explosion. And keep in mind that this wasn't a miniature prop, but a full-scale bridge. So another bridge had to be built and destroyed all over again. Not to mention the fact that Tuco actor Ellie Warlick nearly died while making the movie 3 times. Yes, you heard correctly, 3 times. Once when he drank a bottle of acid, which a technician had placed next to Warlick's bottle of soda. Yeah, without knowing, he just picked it up and drank the damn thing. Then again when the actor had his hands tied while on horseback in order to film a hanging scene, where the horse freaked out and took off and ran for a mile, with Warlick still on the horse who still had his hands tied up. Yikes. And finally he was nearly decapitated while filming a scene involving a train. Warlick would add that Leone was a bit too relaxed when it came to safety measures involving his cast while filming. What may not have helped is Leone didn't speak a word of English and had to communicate with his American cast with an interpreter. However, despite nearly being killed 3 times, Warlick actually got along famously with Leone, as the two shared a similar sense of humour. Well, if getting poisoned by acid and decapitated won't cause a chuckle, then I guess nothing will. However, the same sadly can't be said about Leone and Eastwood. Number 4. The end of a working relationship. It seems that when it came to filmmaking, Sergio Leone was more of a visionary director. He cared about the look of the movie and wanted to capture amazing landscapes and wanted the movie to look perfect and just right. He would also shoot from multiple angles, paying attention to every tiny little detail, which could often be very exhausting for the cast. This and Leone's supposed bad temper really took its toll on Eastwood, where Eastwood would nickname the director Yosemite Sam in regards to his as-mentioned bad temper. By the time filming was wrapping, Eastwood had had enough of Leone's style of filmmaking and decided that this would be the last time that he'll work with the director. In 1968, Leone wanted to work with Eastwood again for a movie called Once Upon a Time in the West. And despite flying out to California to personally give Eastwood the script, Eastwood stuck to his decision and turned the part down. So instead, Charles Bronson, who as mentioned was offered to star in The Good, the Bad and the Ugly but couldn't, took on Eastwood's intended role. According to Wikipedia, Leone would go on to refer to Eastwood as a block of marble who sleepwalks his way through movies. Yeah, it sounds like things got petty. I think it's a shame that these two guys who made brilliant movies together ended their working relationship on such a sour note. Number 3. Translation blunders. Now, when the theatrical trailer was being put together, the powers that be behind the trailer incorrectly referred to Angel Eyes as the ugly and Tuco as the bad, despite the fact that it's actually the other way round. This blunder was put down to a translation mix-up, but it's still a pretty significant blunder, as the trailer was setting the stage of who these characters are, as these characters and their titles are themselves important to the movie, so to get it wrong, yeah, that's kind of a big deal. But thankfully it didn't seem to cause too much confusion with audiences. Another thing that's been noted is the obvious bad dubbing in the American cut when it comes to scenes with non-English speaking actors, with lip movements not matching the dialogue. This has been put down to Leone not filming with synchronized sound, as while filming the movie, he would be playing the movie's film score in the background, I guess in order to set the scene, and he would often shout at the actors. But either way, I don't think it takes away from the enjoyment of the film, nor does it take me out of its momentum. And of course, we can't talk about The Good, the Bad and the Ugly without mentioning Ennio Morricone's amazing score that he composed for the movie. Now, I think of Western pictures, and the first thing that comes to my mind is that immortalized whistle. It's like he took the sound of Western music, but updated it for the time, almost giving it a James Bond sound, what with its twangy guitar. Incidentally, the idea was to make the main theme sound like a howling coyote. The score was actually being crafted before the shoot took place, with Morricone and Leone working on the themes and notes. Hence that Leone would play the score while filming certain scenes, which, as mentioned, led to the dubbing issues. But regardless, the score is a masterpiece, and would actually reach number 4 on the Billboard charts, and would stay on the charts for an entire year. Number 2. The Good, the Bad, and the Critics. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly was released in late December 1967, with the first two dollar movies being released in the States in earlier parts of the year, keeping American viewers up to speed with the trilogy. The original Italian cut ran at 177 minutes, whereas in the US, cuts were made with the movie running at 161 minutes. The UK had it worse, with their cut running at 148 minutes. All up, the movie would make just shy of $39 million on a $1.2 million budget, making it a financial success. So with this new and exciting action movie, which would go on to be considered an immortalised masterpiece, just what did the critics think of it? Well, they hated it. Yeah, the critics just couldn't get behind the movie's violence. Indeed, it was just considered too much, despite Leone claiming that this was intentional, as The Good, the Bad and the Ugly was a satire. So really, when you think about it, The Good, the Bad and the Ugly was kind of like a Quentin Tarantino movie of its time, a time before Quentin Tarantino. Going back to Wikipedia, there also seemed to be something of a snobbery at play, as it suggests that at that time, critics looked down on spaghetti westerns, with the Los Angeles Times referring to it as the bad, the dull, and the interminable. So, yeah, there does seem to be this attitude of, spaghetti westerns? Puh, we're above that. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly would go on to have a huge impact on pop culture, and would widely go on to be considered one of the greatest movies of all time. It is definitely a marvel of filmmaking and a masterpiece, as well as being one of the most influential movies ever, with its popularity never dulling over the years but only increasing. So it just goes to show that The Good, the Bad and the Ugly was a brilliant movie all along. It's just the critics at the time probably just couldn't get over themselves. Number 1. The Good, the Bad and the Ugly sets are still around. As the 1970s went on, the spaghetti western craze had fizzled out, probably due to the release of Star Wars, where the Wild Wild West days were over and spaceship movies were now the craze. And so the last of the classic spaghetti westerns was shot in 1978. However, many sets from The Good, the Bad and the Ugly still stand now, sitting abandoned in the middle of the desert in Almeria, Spain, creating a very eerie reflection of the past. A haunting visual of what once was. A monument to a bygone era of filmmaking which once stood in triumph but now sits in isolation, with nothing but the empty, dry scenery to keep it company. In fact, there are several sets from several spaghetti westerns which now sit dormant in Spanish deserts. And I actually like the fact that they weren't pulled down or destroyed and are still out there, completely untouched. Once again, it's eerie, but it's comforting at the same time, almost making it like a time capsule of its era. In some cases, sets were actually rebuilt, like the graveyard set that was built for The Good, the Bad and the Ugly would get rebuilt, to celebrate the location and its pop cultural significance. As for Clint Eastwood's iconic poncho, he donated it to a friend where it was put on display at a restaurant in California. It's great that the relics from The Good, the Bad and the Ugly are being preserved, as it's a testament to just how important the movie is. Without a doubt, every time The Good, the Bad and the Ugly makes it onto a list of best movies of all time, which it frequently does, it's well earned. It's a great achievement in both cinema and the action genre, and it is without a doubt one of those movies that everyone should see at some stage in their lifetime. So if you haven't seen The Good, the Bad and the Ugly, then definitely check it out, especially if you're a fan of cinema. Yeah, it's a bit dated now, and it feels very 1960s kish. But to me, that just adds to its charm and identity. I quite like the fact that it's absolutely nothing like what you would see nowadays. Anyway, I'm Minty, and I'm going to make my own version. The Good, the Bad, and the Minty. Yeah, I'll see myself out. See ya!